The Nigerian National Petroleum Company, NNPC, has made a strategic shift, reducing its stake in the Dangote Refinery to invest in compressed natural gas (CNG). This move comes amidst allegations of sabotage and questions about the overall strategy of the state-owned oil giant. Now, let's delve into the implications of this decision and its potential impact on the Nigerian energy landscape. Tunde Onakoya, MD, Autoclinicng Solution, joins me for this. Thank you, Mr. Onakoya, for joining me today.
Good morning to you, and thank you for having me.
Great. Now, finally, NNPC said it reduced its stake in Dangote Refinery so it can focus on CNG. As a CNG enthusiast, which you are, and one who plays in that field, I guess this is probably music to your ears.
Yes, it's good news because it's very important that government institutions, government-backed, government-owned, and maybe businesses that government has stake in, key into the policies of government to make it work. The Nigerian government cannot continuously say that we want to dilute our energy mix from just focusing on petrol and diesel to CNG, electric vehicles, and the rest. And the state's largest corporation in terms of the energy sector, which is the NNPC, we will not make strategic moves that shows that direction to key into that policy. I think it's only right that that happens, and it's okay for NNPC to do that. I only hope that they would be able to play competitively in that space, owing to the fact that they are coming into the party a bit later than other stakeholders that have already been in that space, and maybe they would have taken some learnings from that on how they will go about doing this. And of course, NNPC has a huge network of stations across the country, especially after the acquisition of the OVH Energy franchisee that was sold to NNPC from what used to be Wando became OVH Energy and now taken over by NNPC. So there's a massive network of stations that can then be converted into CNG stations, dispensing stations to make this energy transition plan work.
Well, does NNPC actually have that money? Because that's something in contention right here. Initially, when the news came that it was reducing its stake to 7.2%, some persons were wondering if this is as a result of the fact that it could not raise the amount to take up its 20% stake in Dangote Refinery. And the promise then, the promise was sort of fantastic. I mean, the NNPC was able to woo Nigerians on its side to tell us that, this 20% stake is the best thing we've ever done, and all of those things. Don't you think there is? Aren't you worried or skeptical about that?
I'm not worried about it. We cannot underestimate the financial muscle that NNPC would be able to wield at any point in time they want to. We know that NNPC has resources available to it, albeit state resources they have been able to conjure up from.
Mr. Onakoya, this same NNPC is the one that has not been able to pay certain amounts of monies to marketers and all of those things. I'm just asking.
Well, we have to look at the bureaucratic situation also that is around NNPC. Is NNPC running like an independent company? No, I don't think so. And if you are running and you have to follow still the rules of the state, the procurement rule of the state, the financial rules of the states, you are going to be hindered by the bureaucracy that is there. The board of the NNPC, as we know today, is still largely state-run. We have the chairman being appointed by the president, the board being appointed by the president, and all of that. So can they function the way a private company will? No. Are they independent of the government of Nigeria? The answer is still no. So if you say NNPC is unable to pay, you are invariably saying that the federal government of Nigeria is unable to pay. And as far as we know, it's a matter of interest. When it comes to government spending, whatever it is that government wants to spend money on, government always finds a way. Sometimes by virtue of bonds, by virtue of treasury bills and all of that, they get funds. Government always gets funds when it needs to. And don't also forget that the federal government has been doing a lot of dipping its hands into the cookie jar with the CBN over the past administration, which is also something that this administration is trying to take care of one way or the other. And there is no saying that they won't also put their hands in the cookie jar at some point. So if the NNPC needs to pay for something and they want to pay for something, they will pay for it.
But taking another look at it, really, do you think this was a good business decision for, NNPC to sort of pull out of that business the way it did? Are we looking at the cost effect and all of those?
Now, is it a good business decision? I think it's very subjective. Subjective in the sense that the NNPC has to key into the energy transition plan of the federal government of Nigeria. There is no other way to go about it than to key into it. Now, are they doing it right? Well, that is subject to the kind of agreement and arrangement they already have with the Dangote Group right now on how they want to pay this money, the financing. What was the kind of contract that they had in place at the inception of things? Is it a contract that allows either party to pull out given certain notices? Is that being honored? Are they following that due process? If they are already doing that, then there's nothing wrong. That is it on one side. The other side is it a good business decision? Well, NNPC would be able to give that answer. I would want to believe that they have crunched up the numbers on their side, looking at, okay, this is what we can get in returns from Dangote Refinery, and this is what we can get by putting CNG in place. However, one thing will always trump that decision, which is, one, what the federal government wants to do as the potential owner of NNPC, as it were. And secondly, what is the policy of government? Public interest will always trump those business decisions when it comes to government and government agencies and government institutions. So the policy of government is what is at play here, not necessarily even the profitability and all of that. No, that's not really what the bottom line is here. Because as a government, if you want to encourage people to come and invest in something, you have to show workings on your own. You have to show that you are committed to it. You have to show that you are willing to put your money where your mouth is, in this case, and then you can then get other people to want to invest in such a place. Government needs to show workings, and I think they are doing that through the PCNGI and what NNPC has suddenly decided to do.
I want to bring you back to this because for me, it would be an exercise in futility to debate whether or not this clarification is an afterthought. However, did you at any point think NNPC's decision to cap its investment at 7.2% was a sabotage, as is being claimed in some quarters, or it just couldn't raise the money within the specified period? Because there was a period, a time frame within which it was supposed to raise the full amount.
Yes, you see, it will be speculative at best for me to say, oh, this is sabotage. I do not have all the figures. I do not have all the facts. So I wouldn't be able to postulate on that. However, here's one thing I know. NNPC, from inception, have always said they are interested in investing in CNG. They've also said that they want to get a lot of their stations to have CNG capability to be able to dispense CNG to cars. This has been a decision that has been made about a year ago, if you ask me. I mean, immediately after the presidential CNG initiative was launched, NNPC has also said, this is what our plans are. They made their plans very public at that time. This is what we want to do. Now, it is a possibility that NNPC is struggling to finance that plan. At the same time, they are trying to raise money to give to the Dangote Group the 20% stake they are trying to buy. At that point in time, the question of priorities then come in. What then is going to be our priority? Is it to pay for this 20% or to continue with this plan that we have already put in place as far back as last year to key into the energy transition initiative of the federal government? So it is neither here nor there unless we have all the details. It may be that the resources available to the NNPC will not allow them to stretch in both directions. And so they chose to prioritize CNG over Dangote Refinery. Now, it's also a possibility that business decisions are made sometimes based on the business landscape that is showing up. Federal government is saying we want to get 1 million vehicles to run on CNG within the next 5 years. Now, for those vehicles to run, they need refilling stations all over the country. Who else is building refilling stations? Mostly right now is NNPC that is trying to put his hands in it. So for government to achieve that, NNPC has to play its role. And its role is put the infrastructure in place. And I tell you, the cost of infrastructure for CNG is not cheap at all. So NNPC might not be able to stretch its resources to do both sides. However, the Dangote Refinery business is a business on its own that has its own business model and has its own business plan. There would also be contingency plans in place. I also would want to believe that the agreement that has been put in place would allow either party to extricate themselves from that deal based on certain conditions. And it would be, of immense benefit to both parties to see that NNPC has followed through with that particular plan. Because if they have not, then that's a breach of contract that would have its own legal implication on its own. Of course, not just the legal implication, the implication it will have on the operations of the Dangote Refinery will also be an issue here. But at the end of the day, they have to do what they have to do. The NNPC, government of Nigeria, cannot be going in a certain direction, and NNPC is not following in that direction, especially in an area where that is NNPC's specialty. The oil and gas sector in Nigeria is the big deal for NNPC. It's all NNPC exists for. So they have to key into what the government plan is.
I would have thought NNPC is a commercial entity that was, heading towards becoming, public and all of those things. But that's story for another day. Now, let me ask you, it seems obvious that you feel that...
Is it really? That's the question. Is it really a commercial entity?
Because that was what we were told, I think about 2 years ago, and they said they were coming to the market.
So if the federal government is still appointing the board of NNPC that is taking the major decisions for NNPC, if you as a person wanted to invest your money, how much confidence would you have, even if NNPC comes into the stock market now, how much confidence would you have in how that will operate? Especially an NNPC that has not been able to open its books for years, for almost a decade now to Nigerians. When you're making investment decisions in the stock market, you are looking at all the figures, you're looking at all the data, historical data, current data, performance, and all of that when you want to do this. So would you consider NNPC run by government as a commercial institution in the real sense of it? No, it doesn't work that way. The government hasn't yielded its interest. Even if government still owns the stake and they choose to leave the board to be appointed by, independent bodies and put things in place like that, then maybe that confidence can come in. What has happened to the discos? The discos are private, as it were. But how many people have bought shares of discos? How many discos are on the stock exchange today? It is similar to what is going on with NNPC.
Right. Away from that, now the government seems quite, optimistic about CNG, but that optimism is not commensurate with what's on the ground. So how many CNG stations do we have in Nigeria as we speak? And do you think the government is actually walking the talk?
Oh, yes. Like I said earlier, planning is very important in any policy. Some policies will take a long time to come to fruition because of the logistics that comes with it. I'll tell you that prior to May 2024, there was perhaps only one CNG station in the whole of Lagos State. And that is one that is in Ikorodu, privately run, not by any of the major O&G guys. And that was all that Lagos State had prior to May. But between then and now, we now have about 8 in total in Lagos State. Now, that couldn't have happened in 1 week. It couldn't have happened in 2 weeks because the infrastructure needs to be built, the equipment needs to be imported, the gas pipelines need to be laid, approvals need to be sought, and all of that. By the time we put all of that together, it is not a 1 month, 2 months even plan to install or build a CNG station. And that is why I keep saying that what NNPC has decided to do with the stations would make a lot of sense. Already, most of the infrastructure that is required for a station exists with NNPC. So they can then easily retrofit most of their existing stations to be CNG stations. It is easier than having to build a station from scratch. So I would say that's a good one. Secondly, things are extremely slow. That is the word I would use. Slow in the CNG adoption plan. The federal government has launched the pack-to-pack program to give kits to conversion center, which of course, Autoclinic is one of them. We're an affiliate with the PCNGI. The PCNGI wants to send some of the conversion kits to us. to install for commercial vehicles, which the government wants to do 100% for in terms of conversion. But the question still remains, where are the kits? When are these kits going to get around? And when will it begin to affect the cost of transportation? Because the bottom line is that whatever the government is trying to do is supposed to take care of the effect of the removal of fuel subsidy. And that effect is basically that the cost of transportation of goods and services needs to come down, which means the focus should be commercial vehicles. Now, the commercial vehicles needs to be converted to run on CNG at a scale that will automatically drive down the cost. And I emphasize at a scale. So if in the whole of Oyo State, where I am domiciled, we have only 20 or even 100 vehicles that are running on CNG, how will that impact the cost of transportation in Oyo State? I'd say almost nothing. So if we are not getting it at scale or providing financing, and that's very important as well, providing access to financing for people that are willing, especially commercial entities, businesses and ride-sharing companies and commercial transporters, to be able to get facilities to do this conversion, which will speed up the process because government cannot provide everything. Government is bringing in about 30,000 kits. That has little to no impact on the transport sector in Nigeria, if you ask me. So what we need is let there be access to funding for commercial transporters in such a way that they can do this conversion as quickly as possible. There are several conversion centers out there that can get this job done. So let them do the conversion as quickly as possible and begin to drive down the cost. Once that impact is felt, then we will know that it truly where that energy transition plan is beginning to take effect.
All right, let's close on this. Let's close on this.
But we have to start.
I'd like us to close on this. You've said a lot about how that the federal government is doing a whole lot to make sure that this works. But with the opportunities we've said, I mean, you've talked about in CNG, do you think investors are looking in this direction, or maybe the opportunities have not been properly communicated to them? Are we seeing investors coming in to say, you know what, we're going to partner with you? How many of that are we seeing? I mean, in 30 seconds, if possible, so we close on that.
Okay. So this is what is happening there now. At the moment, there are not enough vehicles running on CNG in Nigeria. So it makes no business sense for anybody to install stations unless the person has long-term financing. The only person that can assist them with that long-term financing is when government is able to help them liaise with development partners or development banks or banks that have ability to give them long-term financing so that when they build this infrastructure, they can recoup their funds over time. If that does not happen, we do not have enough vehicles in Nigeria consuming CNG for people to go and invest hundreds of millions of funds that are at 30% interest rate from the banks to build such infrastructure. It's not attractive at the moment, unfortunately. It isn't.
Tunde Onakoya, Managing Director, Autoclinicng Solution. Thank you so much for your insight on the show today.